Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Gabberty, the content marketing expert, bringing you 5 new episodes every week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Hello, Breakthrough Success listeners. I just wanted you all to know before the episode actually starts, I've been working a little bit behind the scenes to give you something really special. So a while ago, I wrote my book, Content Marketing Secrets, which helps people create, promote, and optimize their content for growth and revenue. And I just put the finishing touches together to offer that for free to anyone who is interested. So if you want your free copy of Content Marketing Secrets, all you have to do is head over to markgabberty.com/book. Now, let's jump right into the episode. You hear a lot of stories about ultra successful brands that have been able to become million-dollar companies, in some cases billion-dollar companies, and you just wonder what exactly happens behind the scenes of these ultra successful brands. And I'm really excited about this interview because today's guest knows exactly what those behind the scenes are. Just to give you an idea, he is the co-founder of Pointy, a product that makes it incredibly easy for retailers to get all of their products displayed online. The growing company has been featured in prominent places like TechCrunch, Forbes, NBC, The Wall Street Journal, and many others. And before co-founding Pointy, he was also the CEO of Plink, and that was a visual-based search engine that got acquired by Google. And after that acquisition happened, he served as one of Google's senior software engineers for 3 years. So let's get into this episode. Today's guest for episode 183 of the Breakthrough Success podcast is none other than Mark Cummins. Mark, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Mark. Nice to be here.
Mark, this is going to be weird, like calling you Mark because my name is Mark too, but it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. I am really looking forward to this. And I mean, it's just amazing what you've been able to do so far. I mean, you've created Plink, been acquired by Google, been able to work for Google. Some would say that's one of the best jobs on the planet. Now launched Pointy, and it just doesn't seem like you're going to stop anytime soon. You're just going to keep going. I mean, in a Mixergy interview, I also heard you want to get to like 10,000 stores, 1% of all the US stores by the end of the year. So with like all these things going on, you're still going like all out. What inspires you to continue pursuing these new opportunities and continue to create all these great products?
You know, it's funny because like it doesn't feel like that on the inside. You're just sort of putting one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, and you're just like I never set out with like very, very vast goals. I just kind of was the first company I started partly out of frustration. I was just thinking, this is a product that should exist, and I didn't really see it being built by anyone else. And I initially actually tried to do a sort of small deal where I licensed the technology to someone else, and it was just going kind of slowly. And I kind of thought, well, we can do a better job of this. Let's go do it. And so you kind of like get led into these things almost by like a series of smaller steps. And probably Pointy is like that too. I mean, I obviously set out to build a company with Pointy, but I don't think you definitely don't fully realize, the magnitude of all the things you're going to have to do along the way. And so I think you kind of start small and you sort of learn as you go along. So yeah, I mean, I love doing it, but I'm definitely, kind of you learn as you go along.
And I mean, I really like that message, learn as you go on. Like knowledge as you implement it, that is power. And like, no matter how successful people are, like they're continuing to learn. Like a lot of top investors, a lot of top people in business, sports athletes, they're all continuing to learn more about their craft. And that's an important idea, just to keep on learning. And like, I know that Pointy is not your first company, but I know that you're expanding that as well. And you have a lot of background for being able to build it. But this is based on retailers. And I'm wondering, how exactly do you attract retailers to Pointy? Because this is like a completely new game-changing product that some people may not fully understand yet.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually one of the biggest things I learned in running this company. I mean, so I'm an engineer by background. I did a PhD in robotics. My co-founder also has a PhD in robotics. So like, we're a very technical founding team. So, building the product was something we're very comfortable with. but selling it and marketing it and scaling it was something completely new to us. And so, I mean, I suppose I'd just explain a little bit about what we do and like who our sort of target audience is. So we have a device that small retailers use to get their products online. So most retailers have a website. They might list their opening hours online, but they're typically not listing the inventory of their stores. So, a store might have, 10,000 plus products in the store. And whether or not those products are in stock at a given time, you can't really tell without going to the store or calling them up. That information is not on the internet. And so we bring that information onto the internet. So we have a device that the store connects to their barcode scanner. And they start, as they normally scan the product throughout the day, we find the name and image of that product. We put it on the website. We keep the stock status of that product up to date. So if you're Googling for, where can I find a particular product locally, all the stores that are on Pointy, they rank well in those local search results. And then local consumers can say, I wanted to buy this product. I can see it's on Amazon, but it's also available a block down the street on this Pointy-enabled store. So I can just go there and buy it. And so that's the basic premise of the product. And so, most of our users are small independent retailers. About 80% are like independent or mom and pops retailers. And then the other 20% are kind of larger stores, so maybe up to maybe 100 location chains. And we're doing a little bit with larger chains, just starting to do that. But mostly it's the independents. And so kind of reaching those independents, like figuring out how to get the message out, was something completely new. So I started out just asking for advice. So I just went and talked to people and I said, how do you build a sales team? Like, how do you build a marketing team? And I probably asked 20 people and got maybe 25 answers. Like, no one really agreed with each other about how to do it. And so I kind of figured out, okay, maybe there isn't a particular way to do it. And so we just started to try working it out for ourselves from first principles. So, we really just sort of felt our way into it. So to begin with, we put up some job ads and started interviewing candidates to be our first salesperson. So we thought initially we just go do it, selling it door to door, because that's pretty easy to get started. Like, the very first sale I did myself, I just walked into a retailer and said, hey, I have this thing. You don't know me. Can I attach this to your point of sale and like enable this product for you? And miraculously they said yes, and it went live, which was really like a good sign. So I thought, okay, maybe we have some product that people are interested in. But I knew that walking in and talking to retailers was a way to get started. So our first salesperson was a door-to-door salesperson who would just walk into retailers and tell them about the service and say, hey, do you want to give it a try? You can sort of have a trial for a few months and try the product. But even hiring that first salesperson, we started out, like, we sent out a job ad and we got people to come in and give us like PowerPoint presentations. And we thought that was a way to interview salespeople. After the end of the sales process, or after the interview process, rather, like we interviewed we looked through maybe, 100 CVs, and we kind of interviewed the top 5-10 candidates. And they were all impressive people in various ways. But at the end of the interview process, we didn't really know if any of them were good salespeople or not. And so we kind of just said, okay, we've learned nothing through this process. We need another type of interview process. So we decided to do live sales examples with them. So we thought, well, there are lots of retailers in the world. They haven't heard about Pointy. We'll just make our interview process that we'll just walk out on the street with these interview candidates and walk into stores and try and sell Pointy with them. And we won't tell the retailer that this is an interview situation. We're just going to see what happens. And that actually worked really well. I mean, we took the candidates out. It turned out that the people who were good at giving PowerPoint presentations were not necessarily very good at selling to retailers. And out of that process, like the one candidate just emerged who was really, really good. He was just a really natural salesperson. And in his previous job, he used to sell beer to liquor stores. So he'd say, like, I have a new type of beer. Do you want to carry it in your store? So he was very sort of like, real world, street smart, sort of hard boiled kind of sales background. And that turned out that was good. He was just a natural, like, connecting with retailers and talking to them. But for that interview process, I mean, we were like a 6-person company at the time, and we took, all 6 people out on the road, and we just went, and this was our mission to like get sales to work. And so we tried this out, and it worked. And that one salesperson in our launch city, so we launched in Europe, actually. We launched in Ireland. So in the first city of Dublin, there was, a couple of thousand retailers in Dublin, and he probably met all of them in over a 6-month period. You just knocked on all the doors, talked to them, and a lot of them started using Pointy. So we had maybe 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 of all the retailers in the city using our device, using the system, just based on knocking on doors. And that was cool. It was like, wow, this is working. But then we tried to replicate it, right? Like, so Ireland is a tiny market. There's 3 million people in Ireland. That's like the size of Brooklyn or something. And so we thought, well, we need to go after a bigger market. And so we decided to go after the US market. And that was, that's different. We can't have people, I mean, we potentially could have people knocking on doors in every city and town in the US, but like that's quite a difficult thing to scale. So we had to reinvent the whole sales and marketing process to get it to work in the US. And now it's heavily online based. So we always try to do some online advertising. And we have a website where obviously you can learn about the service and sign up. But we completely reinvented the model for the US. So now it's heavily driven by online advertising. And then stores learn about us through Facebook ads or through YouTube advertising or those kind of digital marketing tools. And the people who learn about us there, they come to our website, they might sign up directly, and they can just go through the whole process online, and we can ship them a device, they can plug it in without ever speaking to us if they want to. But more often than not, they've got some sort of, they're unsure, they might want to check if it's going to work for them. And so instead of like just signing up online, quite often what they do is they like register some interest and they book a time with one of our people to have a chat. And so we talk to them on the phone and we kind of talk them through if it's going to work, what the pros and cons are. And then often they'll sign up there on the phone or go back to the website and sign up. And then we just ship them a device. And that's actually proved really, really successful for us. So we've got retailers in across all 50 states, from Hawaii to Alaska using this, and actually really all over, like, not just in the big cities, but in the small towns as well. So, any sort of, small city in any state, there's probably going to be at least one or two Pointy retailers there. So it's been really, really nice to see the uptake. And we're probably in about maybe 0.5% of US retailers at this stage, but it's growing very quickly. And so that's been kind of cool. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, thank you for giving that really long answer. It's really interesting how like there are a lot of interesting things just within that one answer, but the way that you attracted salespeople and the way that like basically them pitching to the retailer was the version of the interview. I really like that, and how you had to like have a different approach when you were marketing close at home versus in the US where you're an ocean away from that consumer base. So it's interesting how I had to market in different ways. And with the marketing piece for like how Pointy has gotten to its current level and how it's going to grow, I'm wondering if you could share with us the other part of that story. So basically that time frame between when the idea pops up, like, hey, we could do something like this and turn it into something called Pointy, and when you have the finished product. Can you take us along that journey?
So like the very, very start of like building the product?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was like a lot of the early stuff was, so I'm an engineer, and so like the first thing I started to do was just sit down and check. Like I first wanted to convince myself that it would work at all. So there were a couple of like key technical questions. I wasn't sure if, our device, I didn't know if that would work. So I first tried to basically prove myself wrong. So I kind of thought like, here are 3 or 4 really big technical risks. So let's try and like investigate this risk and see if it's going to kill the company. So like one by one, I just sort of investigated those risks. And it turned out, okay, no, we can solve this problem. We can solve this other problem. All these things are going to work. So it's like, well, there's no reason in principle why Pointy isn't going to work. And so I spent a few months on my own doing that. And at that point, I was like, okay, I think this is a company that can work. And I don't really believe in business plans, but I certainly had a kind of a sketch of like all the key things in the company. I was like, okay, these are the technical parts. Here's how many. Like I was actually, I was really. I went across the Pacific on a boat. So I spent 3 weeks crossing the Pacific on a boat, and I had no internet. And so I designed the company kind of in a cabin at sea while I was just kind of trying to estimate all these things. I was like, how many shops are there in America? And so you can actually get a good estimate of that just from the back of an envelope. And I was like, well, how much would it sort of cost us to try and like market to all those shops? And like, how much would it take us? How many engineers are we going to need? How much venture capital are we going to need? So just trying to answer those key questions. And also doing some coding to try and figure out, will this work? Will that work? And so that was the very, very start. And so at that point, I kind of convinced myself, all right, all these key things are going to be okay. And so the very next thing I wanted to do was get a co-founder. So I spent a long time talking to different people, and eventually I kind of found a really good co-founder who was like available and could work on it. And he's been like absolutely kind of central and core to the business. Like having the right business partner is everything really. And those were, I think, the very initial steps. But then the technical thing is, so like the first thing we wanted to do is raise some investment, right? We wanted to get to our seed round. And so we started in like very early 2014, and we spent about a year just working on, like I had some savings from the previous company and from working at Google. So I spent about a year just working on the technology in a small way, getting to the point where we could do a very simple demo. So after about 9-10 months, we had something working well enough that we could put it into one retailer. So that just one shop, get it working in a really basic way. Like everything was sort of held together just with string and sealing wax, barely working, but enough, like the MVP was out there. And so we deployed this, and then we started talking to investors and saying, like, okay, this is the product, we started to execute, and then we raised our seed rounds. We raised about just over like $1 million, $1.2 million, based off that sort of technical demo in the early team. And at that point, so that was, then we were sort of more into the mode of, okay, let's start actually building this out as a company now. Let's start growing the team and putting things in place and scaling up.
It's just amazing all the planning that goes into it. It's funny, like I hear there are like a few stories that come up where like the entrepreneur like starts his plan with a napkin and a pen, and like, I mean, that's sort of what it sounds like. You were just on this boat on the Pacific, no internet, and that's how it started. And it's interesting to hear how like companies like Pointy began, because it's just like the way that it began, like without internet or anything like that, just something that you thought about and you wanted to expand on from there. And obviously since then you've been able to hit 0.5% of US stores. I think like during that Mixergy interview, you were like 3,300. Is that?
Yeah, I think that was like, we're probably at 4,600 or something now. Like, it grows quite quickly.
Yeah. It's growing quickly. Like 0.5%, like to some people may not sound like a lot, but that's 5,000 stores, and it is growing quickly. So it can grow. Like, I mean, this, like you have a lot more time invested in the company than I do. But if you had to start marketing Pointy all over again, what would you do differently?
We've learned a lot. So maybe we would have started more with the model we have now, where it's more online and scaled up. But like, it's very easy to say. Like, I think actually doing door to door was quite valuable. I mean, it doesn't scale that far, but you get a very direct connection with the consumer, right? Like very direct relationship with the user, the retailer. And so like, we'd walk into their shop, we'd get to know them. For the first 20 users, like we still keep in touch with them. We're kind of friends with them. And we actually had a sort of a company party a few days ago, and they came along, so like that kind of connection and getting to really know your first users and sort of figure out like what's working and what isn't is very valuable. And I don't think you get that if like people are signing up through, Facebook ads, right? And so I think what we're doing now is definitely a better way to grow, but maybe it's not a better way to start. So yeah, I mean, we probably would have got to where we are faster, but I mean, I don't really regret anything that we did, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, that is an interesting view, because like I can see the door-to-door taking a lot more time, and the Facebook ads allowing you to reach more people quicker because you can reach people as you sleep. But that element of the relationship is something really important as well. So like it's really good that you were able to like just talk about how building the relationship is important, how you're growing now. And I just really like the insights with that answer. And I know that there are some people who like a lot, we all have different goals that we set for ourselves. Some of them are bigger than others, but some people feel stuck with the goals that they've set for themselves. I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from accomplishing their goals?
It's an interesting question. I think a lot of people, it's an unwillingness to set out without knowing where you're going. I think you have to have a high tolerance for the unknown, a high tolerance for risk. I think you have to work very hard. I mean, I think most people know that, but like the level of intensity of a small company is pretty extreme. I mean, there are times where it's good and times when it isn't so good. Like, definitely that. But I think you're actually working on the wrong problem. Like, I see a lot of people who are really smart and really dedicated who maybe just don't think hard enough about solving the right problems. They work on things that are maybe, like I think picking the right problem to work on is really good one, and then going after something like this is something that, let's say, like Larry Page or Elon Musk or something say that, like, if you work on the most outrageously large problems, in some ways that's easier because, first of all, you don't have so much competition. And secondly, the best people get attracted to working on the right problems because you can do a lot on your own to begin with, but you can't go very far with, a small team. Like, ultimately, every company is about building the best team, attracting the best people, and then they're going to build the best thing. And so I think picking the right problem is probably, I think, the number one thing I would say.
And that's a really interesting view. I really like the idea of, like, you hear a lot about risk taking, like that's just something you have to do, but I've never really heard high tolerance of the unknown. And in some cases, when you are pursuing a goal, there are a lot of parts of that journey that you don't know. You have an idea of how it's going to happen, but you don't really know all the pieces, especially as different parts of that journey change along the way, which is just natural to happen. And in any journey that we go through, there are going to be certain challenges along the way. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share one big challenge you faced in your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
I mean, there are a lot. There are a lot. I mean, what tends to be the most difficult is, I mean, if anything goes wrong with the people in the team, that's incredibly painful. And so I think, a lot of people say that, like, you should hire more slowly than you want to and probably fire more quickly than you want to. So I think that that's always good advice. You should probably raise money earlier than you think you need it because you can come, like, things that always takes longer than you think as well. And so, like, if you're short on money or running out of money, which, most startups are often in that danger, that can be a really big one. So one of my friends gave me some good advice here. He said that you should optimize for success, not for outcome. And so what he means by that is, like, you should optimize, like, the sign of the result and not the size of the result. So, like, you want to have a positive result rather than a negative result. I'm worried more about that than having a big positive result or a small positive result, right? Like, just try and get it to work and don't worry about how much it's going to work. So I think that can apply to fundraising, that, like, a lot of people worry a lot about sort of optimizing a funding round and, getting it all exactly right, which, I mean, I worry about that a lot. But I think ultimately the much more important thing is, like, don't fail. The primary goal of a business is not to make money. The primary goal of a business is to stay in business. Like, you want to be here next week. And that's, like, the prerequisite for everything else. So I think that's a sort of a helpful mindset.
I really like that mindset. You're hitting us with a lot of value in this episode. And I thought it would be appropriate, like you were talking about this within your challenge. One of them was just raising money in general. And you created Plink and Pointy. I'm sure you had to raise venture capital for those. I'm wondering, how do you go about raising the money? Like, how do you shape your presentation? Who are you reaching out to? How, like, when you have to if you have to raise money for something, like, how are you going to do it?
So, I mean, the first thing is you need to have certain proof points, right? You need to be, like, there's no point trying to raise money if all you've got is a cocktail napkin. Like, unless you're, an absolute celebrity entrepreneur, that tends not to work. So you have to have something credible to bring to the investor, right? And that might be, like, a stellar team in a big market, or it might be, an impressive early product, or, like, so first of all, I think you have to be in the right place. You have to have the right ingredients. But assuming that you've got that, like, you think we're at the right milestone to raise a Series A or a seed round or whatever, and, we have the appropriate amount of revenue or so on. So assuming that part is in place, I mean, after that, fundraising is basically a pure networking exercise. I think the thing you have to realize is that almost every investor is going to say no to you, and that's normal. So it's like any sales process. Like, people tell you, you have to know how many no's you need to hear to get a yes. And that's exactly the same with fundraising. Like, I've heard some people say, kind of pick the right fund and pick the right partner. And I think I found that I wasn't really able to do that. Like I started out really researching every investor that I was going to meet, and I still really, really research every investor I'm going to meet. But I found that I had very little ability to predict whether they were going to like us or not. Because I kind of researched somebody, I'd be like, oh, this is the perfect investor for us. He's like really interested in this space and, you know, has been in this company and like has all the right factor of ingredients. And then you go meet him and be like, oh, but yesterday I decided I'm really into healthcare technology and I'm not doing deals in your space anymore. So I found like I had very little ability to predict what investors were going to like about us and what they weren't. And so I thought ultimately, I think it does come down to ultimately just meeting enough people. I've also find that you almost basically never convince anyone. Like, you just sort of, they're already good. They're, whether or not they like you is kind of almost determined before you enter the room. You know, they've got a sort of set of ideas and priors and beliefs. And it's kind of more about finding the person who fits with you than convincing them. I mean, you have to be credible. Like you can absolutely convince an investor not to invest in you. So you can come in and be an idiot and ruin it. But I don't think you can invest. You can't really convince an investor to invest in you. I don't believe that happens that often. It's more about sort of finding the fit with the right person, and that's basically a networking exercise. So, I mean, normally most entrepreneurs will have some network. You can meet a few investors, and if they're not going to invest in you, quite often they'll be generous and they say, "Well, this deal isn't for me, but you maybe should meet these other people." Or you know, so generally I find that like getting the meetings is, you know, there's a lot of legwork involved, but it's quite doable. And I think it's just meeting the right investors until you find the one who, like, you know, really shares your vision and gets excited about the same things. And don't be worried about all the rejection along the way, because that's just normal.
And yeah, I really like the like you're meeting with so many different investors. Some of them are going to say no, others are saying yes, and you're just a key thing being persistence. Just reaching out to all these people, building up the relationships. And even if you get someone to say no, as Mark mentioned, that no, like that person may share with you other people, and one of those people may be a yes. So it is a lot of work. It is a lot of hustle, but Mark's done it. Others have done it. You can too.
And they can give you feedback that can be helpful. Like, you know, after every presentation, you know, we'd adjust our deck a little bit, figure out, okay, that didn't go so well, like we can do this a bit better. So definitely the feedback is useful. And often they'll say, like, you know, I'm not going to invest, but you should meet this portfolio company, or you should meet this other person. And so it can actually be a very useful exercise for sort of biz dev, you know, in terms of like building up partnerships and so on. So I think it's really time consuming, like really, really time consuming. And I think, you know, the only person who can do it really is the founder. So it will suck up, you know, potentially months of your time. I mean, it depends, you know, sometimes it can happen in weeks if you're like a hot company, or, you know, you're a hot round. But yeah, it's time consuming, but it can be valuable.
And like the learning lessons in that, I'm sure, are a lot. And like one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was just something to the effect of like, you got to continue learning. And I feel like everyone listening to episodes like this, they value their knowledge, like they're continuing to learn. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 book recommendations that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
3 book recommendations. Wow. I read a lot. I love books. So maybe I have to think about this. It's so hard to pick my 3 favorites. What have I read recently that was very good? I'm going to recommend, looking at my bookshelf over here behind me, I'm going to recommend a science fiction book. It's like, you won't learn anything really. It's just a wonderful book. And, you know, it's full of fun ideas. So it's a book called The Quantum Thief by a guy called Hannu Ramaneji. I'm screwing his name. What else is good? If you want a sort of business book, I'd recommend a book called How Brands Grow. That's quite an old school book. It's sort of almost like a debunking of marketing. And I found that book very, very good in terms of understanding how to build a traditional brand. So that's like how to build something like Coca-Cola. And I just found that kind of like, you know, like very interesting because it's got a very different perspective on how that works. What else will I recommend? Let me see. Yeah, let's see.
So many options.
Too many. Yeah, too many. There's another one I'm just looking over here on my bookshelf. It's called The Beginning of Infinity. book by David Deutsch, which is another book about, it's really a book about ideas. And, like, I don't know, it's just a great book. So those are my favorites. I'm not sure they're going to be much use to anyone about starting a startup, but they're great books.
Mark, thank you for sharing those great book recommendations. And if anyone here is interested in audiobooks and you are not on Audible yet, you can get a free book by going over to markguberty.com/audible. You can pick from millions of different options. That link will be in the show notes along with Mark's book recommendations at markguberty.com/E183. And before we wrap up this episode, Mark, I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
I'm going to give you a very offbeat answer. I think that, like, it's very easy to be clever. I think it's much harder to be kind. I think that's a really difficult thing. So I think you should ask yourself, how can you be better to the people around you? How do you think more about people who aren't you? So that's, I think, a good advice for everyone, including myself.
I really love that question. I really haven't gotten a question like that in a while. And like, if we just think about that, I mean, it does make the world a better place. It also makes us better people and helps us in many ways.
I think, it's actually in everyone's long-term best interests. I think that, like, short-term best interests and long-term best interests are often opposed. And I think thinking about, building relationships and being good to people around you is something that is, even if you're just sort of like building up for your long-term self-interest, I think it's always a very good way to be. The startup community is very generous and pays it forward. That's something I really love about it. And, it's actually sort of very mission-driven often, and that's excellent.
Well, Mark, I do appreciate you for sharing all these great insights on the show. You gave us so much value, and for anyone who wants to learn more about Pointy, you can just go over to pointy.com. That will be in the show notes. It's really innovative technology for any retailers who just want to get their products online. I wish you the best of luck with Pointy. I know it's going to keep growing, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Mark.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn